What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic channel. Today, we're talking college football DFS ahead of Week 6, the Saturday main slate. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're brought to you by Prize Picks. They have a first match deposit bonus of $100, and you will get one free month of Odd Shopper when you take advantage of that. All sorts of sports, including the major ones, and college football. Odd Shopper is going to help you take advantage of all those down to a player prop level. Link is in the video description below. If you or somebody you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 to play. All right, let's dive into the slates. We kick things off with Red River. It is Oklahoma taking on Texas. Spread is 5 points in favor of Texas. The total in the game is 60.5 points. Oklahoma has taken some recent money. I think both these teams, they have a little bit left on the bone in terms of their pass rate. Couple easy schedules. Texas has the tough game against Bama, of course, but cupcakes aside from that, two backup quarterbacks in Baylor and Kansas most recently. Oklahoma's playing fast. They're 35th in pace. Dillon Gabriel's running more than he ever has in his career, 95 yards. That's noteworthy because at times he's taken sacks in the past. This year he's being kept upright, and he has a decent rushing floor, whereas previously you might catch negative rushing yards on occasion. He's averaging 318 through the air on just 31.5 attempts. If Texas reduces this efficiency through their strong defensive play, he should make up for it with volume. Still not among the top 5 price-adjusted quarterbacks, but not far behind. Definitely live for tournaments. Oklahoma, they run the running back roulette. I think maybe they've found something in Marcus Major. Javonte Barnes has been injured. In the last 2 games, they've somewhat committed to Marcus Major. 15 carries, 19 carries, 7 targets in that span. Tawi Walker and Gavin Sawchuk have popped up for big games at times. So I hesitate to say he's cash viable or anything like that. But the route rate's been good and the opportunity recently has been good. So I think tournaments you can play Major without hesitation. In the receiving core, Oklahoma doesn't trot their receivers out for a full 90% route share like a lot of teams do. Ohio State, even Texas will do this. Oklahoma doesn't. You'll see Nick Anderson, Gavin Freeman, Jaquez Petaway, Jaden Gibson, LV Bunkley Shelton. They'll all rotate onto the field for a handful of snaps, and it somewhat reduces the ceiling of the pass catchers. With that said, you do have explosive athletes like Angel Anthony. He's the player I prefer. I expect Stoops, Anthony, and Jalil Farouk to come in around 70-ish% of the routes, maybe 75%. And Anthony, from a price-adjusted standpoint, he's more explosive than Farouk and Stoops. Target share is not all that different between them. Very clearly leads this team in receiving. I'll just take the most explosive athlete. Not much to see at tight end. They're using Blake Smith in a rotation with Stogner of late. For Texas, Quinn Ewers does not run as much as Dillon Gabriel. He does have positive rushing yards this year. I think that's more the product of his offensive line keeping him upright. And he doesn't throw as much. This Texas team is a little slower. 30 attempts per game. He's averaging 271.5. I would rather play Gabriel straight up than Ewers, but it's hard to really poke holes in a guy that has a team total of nearly 33 points. I think Ewers is fine for tournaments. He would not be in the cash consideration for me. He's pretty easy to stack if you do use him in tournaments. Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell will play nearly 100% of the routes in competitive games. As we saw last week, A.D. Mitchell can pop up for 13 targets at any point in time, as we know Worthy can as well. I think A.D. Mitchell's a slightly better price-adjusted play, but I'll be looking to mix and match them both in stacks of this game. It is a very good game-to-game stack. Jatavian Sanders is allegedly healthy enough to play. Music to my ears. He's the best price-adjusted Texas player on the slate at 4,700. He led the team in receiving prior to his most recent injury, which occurred very early in that game, depressing his stats, only 1 target, and it made his route rate plummet. But he'll be out there almost every snap if he's healthy. Jordan Whittington is more of a rotational player at this point. When they use 2 tight ends like Gunnar Helm or a rotational receiver, wide receiver 4 like Nair or Cook, it's Whittington that is suffering. Find the 200 to get to Sanders. Backfield, I think the only reason CJ Baxter saw so many carries last week was the blowout of Kansas with their backup quarterback. 15 carries for Baxter. He was only at 6 the week prior. You have at least 19 touches for Jonathan Brooks in 3 straight games, and he's done nothing to lose this job. Just hyper efficient, good pass game role. I think Brooks is still firmly in play at 6,700. Second game, we have Maryland taking on Ohio State. It's a 20-point spread in favor of the Buckeyes. 56.5 total is pretty good. Maryland, Tagovailoa is a similar signal caller to Ewers and Gabriel, but the team total is way lower here. He doesn't run a ton. He hasn't taken a ton of sacks, only 2 on the year, but this is by far his stiffest test defensively. I think the floor is pretty low with Tagovailoa if he does take sacks, and then he'll have good volume, 34 attempts per game. He's averaging 295 yards per game, but does he 300-yard bonus against this elite defense? Because that's what you need. I think for bigger tournaments, you can look at Tagovailoa, but I'd rather use maybe a Maryland run back if you're playing the Ohio State side. The backfield's tough to get to. Roman Hemby basically had one game where he handled kind of a bell cow workload, but they're just using too much Littleton and McDonald for me to be really interested at this price. 6,800 is way too expensive. McDonald should return last week after the 1-week absence. Maryland also rotates their receivers similar to Oklahoma. The only guy above 70% of the routes is Ty Felton. I would play him, Jayshon Jones, and Prather as runbacks, maybe tight end Corey Dykes. But I don't want Octavian Smith, Tyrese Chambers, any of the ancillary pieces to this offense. Ohio State, 69th in pace, 53% pass rate. McCord's been disappointing. He runs less than any of the signal callers we've talked about so far, and he's in the same price range. He's also the least efficient, and he has the least volume. 29 attempts per game, 264 yards. Perhaps the volume increases, but they've been in tougher matchups. It hasn't increased much. McCord, if you were just ranking the 4 we've talked about, would be a distant 4th, and I'm not sure he's in the top half of signal callers, price adjusted on this slate. It's hard to really poke a ton of holes. They have a 38 implied team total, so his projection is not going to be terrible, but I would rather find the upside with other signal callers. Trevion Henderson kind of has some really nice untapped potential for a team with a team total like this. Last week, he handled a 70% route share. His carries have been rising. They don't seem too excited about Mayan Williams, who they've benched. We haven't seen Dallin Hayden really at all this year. They took converted linebacker and reconverted him to running back. That was Chip Trayanum. He's been the change of pace. He's still expensive, though, so it's tough to click Henderson. For tournaments, I think he's live. Where you probably just want to focus your attention for this team total and tournament specifically is the receivers. Marvin Harrison, Emeka Ibuka. Harrison allegedly is going to be healthy. McCord has, outside of like one game this year, Harrison's been bad for DFS, not real life. And that comes down to price adjustments. Like you have Harrison at 8,900, or you can go play the LSU receivers who we're going to get to in a second because they're priced laughably. It's no question who you'd rather play straight up. It comes down to, do you want the leverage with Harrison for tournaments? Can he score enough to make this price tag worthwhile? I think it's unlikely, but we know he's an absolute baller. Ibuka, same situation, still like $1,000 more expensive than the LSU receivers. Stover and Fleming are on the field every snap in competitive games. Maybe you look to a contrarian play there. But for a team with a 38 total, I surprisingly don't have a lot of interest, and I do not think they're going to project as well as some people might believe behind this 38 implied team total. LSU, Missouri. This is the game we definitely want to target for DFS. Not only does it have shootout written all over it, 64 total, 4-point spread in favor of LSU, but DraftKings specifically did a putrid job pricing it. FanDuel did a great job. Good job, FanDuel. LSU 49th in pace, 53% pass rate. Jaden Daniels is $9K. He's the most appropriately priced LSU asset. He's still a value at this price tag. Elite rushing ability, 292 yards on the ground. He's averaging 341 through the air on 33 attempts. Even if Missouri can limit him, and Missouri does have the best defense he's seen all year, Daniels can make up for this with volume, but I don't think his efficiency is going to be limited too much here. So many paths to a good floor and a solid ceiling. Daniels, very strong cash consideration. The backfield, do you trust Brian Kelly to not be a moron and keep giving Logan Diggs the role he's received the last 2 weeks? I think he will, but I hesitate to say Diggs is like a cash play or anything like that. He saw 19 carries last week, 3 targets, awesome route rate, and he performed on the 22 touches. But I don't know what Brian Kelly was doing during spring and fall practices, because he's routinely put bad players on the field over studs. He's done this on defense, really at every position. the most glaring position on offense he's done this is running back. So I don't know, Brian Kelly, this offense, they're complete morons, but I think Logan Diggs has played his way onto the field. We'll see. If you trust the role, he's a very good tournament play, should be strong leverage off Daniels in this pass game. The pass game. The elephant in the room is DraftKings severe errors pricing Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas. 6,500 for Nabers, 61 for Thomas. Nabers is averaging 125 yards per game. Thomas is averaging 107. I don't think we need to go into this. Play at least one of them in cash. Kyron Lacey is very interesting this week. We do not have Chris Hilton or Aaron Anderson. Kyron Lacey's routes have bounced all over the place. I think at full health, he's probably going to come in around 60%. But we saw both of these guys deal with injuries recently, and there have been times when Lacey's skyrocketed in routes. And the only other significant player at receiver who's gotten routes this year is Shelton Sampson, and I believe he's a true freshman. I remember him on the recruiting circuit, but could be getting my years mixed up. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I don't know if they will give anyone else like full snaps here. Lacey might flat out get like 100% route share along with Nabers and Thomas. Another excellent GPP play. Mason Taylor's their tight end. He will receive 80 to 90% of the routes in competitive games. He's really cheap, but he doesn't offer as much explosiveness as the receivers. He's an uninspiring tight end who falls down immediately when he catches the ball, but what really can you ask for at 4,500? He should be in your pool for sure. Missouri, Brady Cook, he's been a little bit of a different player this year. And I don't mean this from a talent standpoint. He certainly overachieved in that regard, but he's not running as much and he's getting more done as a pure passer. He's averaging 293 per game through the air, very live for a 300-yard bonus. Whereas last year he was kind of like a game manager. You really needed him to run, and he did that a ton. So I think there's a little meat left on the bone with Brady Cook in terms of rushing. I think the floor is actually much better than what we've seen. And this is a guy that has good designed rushing attempts. He has 29 designed rushing attempts this year. Be looking to Brady Cook for sure in DFS. A very strong play, cash consideration. The backfield, Cody Schrader and Nathaniel Pete. It's about a 60-40 split. Schrader's a little expensive for my liking. Same with Pete. Guys like Diggs on the other side, I believe, are more intriguing. But for tournaments, you could look to a guy like Schrader. Just a really good game environment, won't be owned. On the Missouri side, Theo Weiss, Luther Burden, they're right in this conversation with Nabers and Thomas. Excellent plays. Luther Burden's averaging 10.6 targets per game and 128 yards. Theo Weiss hasn't been quite as efficient, but he's still averaging 7 targets per game. His route rate on the year is at 96%. These guys are excellent options. And then you have Mookie Cooper. He's now seen 4.7 targets over the last 3 games. I think a lot of this has to do with Mekhi Miller getting hurt, who I don't think plays here. But you need a really cheap option. Mookie Cooper, similar to like a Kyron Lacey on the other side, where you can get there if you're playing big enough tournaments. Not interested in the tight ends. Rutgers, Wisconsin. This game has a 44 total, 13-point spread. Both these teams are slow and run heavy. Wisconsin, even though they're supposed to be running this air raid, their pass rate's only 47.5%. They are faster than Rutgers. They're 52nd in pace. Rutgers 127th. That's about what we expect. Not much to really see on the Rutgers side with a team total this low. Gavin Wimsatt doesn't throw a lot, 21 attempts per game. He is mobile, but there's just not a ceiling on him at this price tag. I'd rather look elsewhere. Backfield's probably more of a committee than people think. Last week, they played Wagner. So you see Monongai's 19 carries. Well, they also gave Benjamin 7, Samuel Brown 9, Aaron Young 9. I don't think they would love to use Monongai in a 28 carry role unless they have to. So considerable downside for a player at this price, especially as, they have a 15-point implied team total. Receivers basically out of the question for me. We don't know the status on Chris Long. I don't think he plays, but it's basically injuries that have given Christian Dremel, Jaquay Jackson, Isaiah Washington near full-time roles. Washington's route rate plummeted last game too. I think the only guy who's safe is Dremel. The price on Jackson's pretty nice at $3,900. If you need a pure punt, he's averaging 5.8 targets per game over the last 4. But I think we could do better elsewhere. Wisconsin, team total at 28.5, not terrible. They've neutered the offense when they've been killing opponents, which makes sense. Mordecai has played them out of games. just as frequently as he's played them into games. They ran him a little more in the last game. He had 10 design attempts, which they should lean into because he does have good mobility. But prior to that, it hadn't been part of his game. He's averaging 32 attempts per game, horrific efficiency, just 218 yards. I've been losing tons of money on Mordecai. I think you probably need a better dance partner than Rutgers to coax the ceiling out of him. So at 8,200, similar to Kyle McCord, I'd rather just find the salary for Gabriel, Ewers, definitely the LSU, Jaden Daniels, and I think you could just go down to Brady Cook rather than play a guy like Mordecai. Where we definitely need to consider some exposure is Braylon Allen. Ches Malusi's out. Braylon Allen's 8,400. But, I mean, their backup running back, Jackson Acker, only has 9 touches on the year. He probably has to carry the ball a few times, but, man, like, Braylon Allen already had the pass game role. Ches was really siphoning off a ton of carries, double-digit carries per game, but now who else are they going to give the ball to? Braylon Allen at 8,400 is an awesome play. Just a matter of, do you have the salary? Do you prioritize him over the LSU-Missouri game? I think probably not. But contrarian builds, Braylon Allen's an excellent option. Maybe we even can look at Jackson Acker. Like, what are the chances this is an 80-20 split and you get 8 touches out of Acker? Because Ches was getting a ton of work. Now, he's definitely not the same Acker's not the same talent as Ches, but however you predict this split to be, if you think it's close enough between Allen and Acker, you could maybe use him for tournaments, not to mention Wisconsin's a 2-touchdown favorite. Receivers, very difficult for me to play any of these guys. Route rates, not only are they inconsistent, but they ebb and flow. Chimere, DK, CJ Williams, Will Pauling, Bryson Green, Skylar Bell, they're in a rotation. CJ Williams, the 7-target game last week, but his route rate's at 49%. DK by far has the most consistent routes, but you're paying for that at 5,200. I would rather just punt with CJ Williams or Skylar Bell, to be honest. Bryson Green, perhaps. But, man, nobody on this team even has 20 targets yet. Tough to play Wisconsin receivers. Washington State, UCLA, 3-point spread in favor of the Bruins. 60.5 total, which has come way down. People really think UCLA has an awesome defense, despite playing nobody good. And one of their few tough opponents, Utah, is using a running back at quarterback. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying I have questions about how good their ceiling is. We've seen this a couple times. You know, like the Big Ten West is a great example of this. Year in, year out. Like previously, people would think Wisconsin had this elite defense, and their schedule is comprised of really easy non-con games, and then, you know, they'd go in to Ohio State or something like that, and people would fade J.K. Dobbins or Trevion Henderson, whoever the lead back is at the time. And then suddenly it's a halftime, they have 95 rushing yards, and people are confused how an NFL caliber player like J.K. Dobbins could rack up 100 yards on this elite Wisconsin defense. All I will say is at least factor in level of competition when you look at these defenses. Not saying UCLA is bad, just they have not played anybody good. Anyway, that's not the case here. Washington State and Cam Ward, very good. They are 3-point underdogs, but they still have a good team total. For reference, it's higher than Wisconsin's. They're fast. They're 48th in pace. They play the air raid system that we know and love. Cam Ward has been amazing this year. He's played some decent defenses. I mean, this team played Oregon State. They played Wisconsin. He's carved them all up. He's running more than he ever has in his career. He has 26 designed attempts, and he's at least 7 in 3 of the last 4 games. That's excellent for Ward's floor. Then he's averaging 36 attempts, 350 yards per game, just shy of that. He's one of the best price-adjusted signal callers in this range. I think his floor is better than a lot of the guys we've talked about previously, but I love this range for stacking. I think it'll be contrarian, especially because so much ownership projects to go to the LSU-Missouri game. Backfield is not something I can play. Not only is it a somewhat committee-based approach with Nakia Watson, Jalen Jenkins, and Payne, but now Ward rushing the ball more. They don't run the ball a ton to begin with, so Ward siphoning off some of these is not good for Watson and company. At receiver, little bit thin. Lincoln Victor's out. DT Sheffield left the team. So that kind of leaves us Josh Kelly, Carlos Hernandezson, Kyle Williams as the main guys to look at. Josh Kelly, 11 targets last game. He by far has been the most efficient receiver not named Lincoln Victor. Second is Kyle Williams. But Carlos Hernandez at 3,900. I mean, if you need a punt option, he has to be among the top 3 punts on this slate at 3,900. He's going to play on every route, essentially, and this team runs 4 wide a ton. I'll be looking to play him quite a bit here. Otherwise, the guy that stepped up for the most part was Isaiah Hamilton. I'm not sure if we can play him at 3,800. I would rather just find the 100 and play Carlos Hernandez. They rotate that 4th receiver sometimes with like tight ends, Billy Revere and whatnot. So I would just try to get Carlos Hernandez if possible. UCLA, Dante Moore is $6K. He's tough. I thought they would run him more, but he only has 4 designed attempts on the year, 11 sacks. He's also not scrambling. Like, instead of moving around the pocket when he's under pressure, he just takes sacks. Floor is really low for him, so I would rather just play one-off receivers, stuff like that. Backfield's a 50-50 committee. No ifs, ands, ors about it. Split right down the middle. Carson Steele, TJ Harden. Tough for me to get to that at their prices. Receiver. This is where I want some exposure to UCLA, especially like if you're running Cam Ward stacks. I think this game is really live for skinny stacks. You can use like both receivers on sides of this game. UCLA is passing 51% of the time, and they've the 13th ranked pace. So while more sacks kind of play him out of the slate, like J. Michael Sturdivant at 6K, he'll be contrarian. He's averaging 5.5 targets per game. Logan Loya, Kyle Ford, they round out your primary 3 receivers. Ford rotates a little bit with Cam Brown, but these guys are interesting in this particular game environment. It's by far their best game environment of the year, and I'm not sure people are going to click them. Most recently, Cam Brown, 59% of routes, Ford at 45%. Both Loya and Sturdivant haven't seen their roles change really game in, game out. So Loya would be the preferred punt option for me. Sturdivant is the guy you pay up for. Virginia Tech, Florida State, blowout city, 24-point spread. 24-point spread, 52 total. Florida State's the obvious favorite. Pace in this game should be bad. Name your score situation for Florida State. Kyron Jerome should start here for Virginia Tech. He's mobile. He's not going to throw for many yards. I would rather just, I don't know. You should be getting salary if you're playing Kyron Drones. In the backfield, Bashul, Tutin, and Malachi Thomas have like a 60-40 split, maybe 65-35. And it looks awesome when you're beating up on teams like Pitt, and you can have Tutin get 25 carries, Malachi Thomas get 9. But when things don't go your way, Tutin ends up with 10 and Malachi ends up with 4. That's way more likely than the most recent outcome. Receiver is a complete disaster for this team. Drones can't throw. None of the receivers are cheap enough where I'm clicking their name. You should get paid extra salary to roster 1. Their team total is also 14. Anyway, Florida State, Jordan Travis, if you think he's pushed enough, he's among the best price-adjusted signal callers on the slate. He has good mobility. His efficiency has been awesome. All this comes down to is how live you think Virginia Tech is to push Florida State in this game. That, to me, makes Travis interesting for tournaments. Won't be as owned as the LSU-Missouri game for certain. Backfield's a 3-way committee. Trey Benson, he leads on early downs. Toafili's the pass-catching back, and Rodney Hill will spell them both on occasion. Tough to get to at their prices. Receiver goes right along with Jordan Travis. I think this team will be somewhat contrarian for stacking. Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman are your 2 locked-in pass catchers. Both of them, they're going to be contrarian because of how much ownership the LSU guys get. Love playing them for leverage. Jaheim Bell, tight end, he's the 3rd guy I would look to really, really cheap. I view him in the same light as like a Jatavian Sanders. He's been getting carries recently. He's only averaging 4 targets per game, but it's by far the 3rd best on this team. And lastly, Florida State has changed their rotation. They're no longer running 3 wide on every single play. And this is interesting to me. They use Kyle Morlock a ton. His route rate has been above 50% in the year. It was well above that last game. And Jaheim Bell, over half of his snaps were either in the slot or out wide. So he's being used more like, a Kyle Pitts or something from a usage standpoint. I think he'll be far more involved in that. But just for reference, like Brock Bowers, like he lines up everywhere. Jaheim Bell's a really interesting player with a pretty good floor ceiling combo for a punt option. Alabama A&M, 46 total. Pick 'em. and I'm taking a ton of money. So right away, amazing real life game. Not too interesting for DFS because of this low total, but there's definitely room for a ceiling. Texas A&M I personally think it's an overreaction to their game against Auburn, who doesn't have a quarterback, and Arkansas, who doesn't have an offensive line, to see them as a pick'em against Alabama. Like, this team got clobbered by Miami, who, preseason people weren't too excited about. Anyway, Alabama, they lose to Texas, of course. Texas is an amazing team, the number one team in the country, according to some. They have a lackluster showing against USF with the two morons under center. And then they beat Ole Miss and Mississippi State, who are arguably both better wins than anything Texas A&M's put on the board. All this to say, I don't understand the spread. And I think there's a chance maybe the over comes in on this because of some lapses in defense that aren't being factored in because of the small sample and easy opponents. Milroe, 8,300 isn't bad, and his mobility keeps him live on a slate like this. The rushing's really hard to predict. He goes from 11 designed attempts to 3 last week. The 11 came against Ole Miss, so in competitive games, I do think you see Bama run him more. That running ability is dynamic, and if he gets a decent amount of rushing output, he'll be live for tournaments. Through the air, he's been really efficient. The guy's averaging over 10 yards per attempt. I don't think people realize this. His completion's over 70%. He's been good as a passer. He just doesn't have a lot of volume, and that's come mainly in the last 2 games, because I don't know if it's Saban and Tommy Rees's year figuring out how to use Milroe properly. He is a decent floor-ceiling combo. I think it's going to take a little bit to get there, definitely more than some other signal callers. So he'll be down the list a little bit of quarterbacks in this range. Would rather play like Cam Ward, but won't be Xing out Milroe by any means. Backfield 70-30 split, McClellan, Roydell. Not really great price-adjusted plays for this game environment. Receiver for Bama is really tough. They rotate guys. Jermaine Burton's questionable. Watch his status. Even with that, you didn't have guys like Bond or anybody overtaking the receiving core. And if Alabama can take their preferred method of like their game plan, they don't want to throw the ball a lot. So you're never going to get voluminous games. You kind of need big plays. None of the Alabama receivers are that interesting to me. If I was playing any of them, it would be like the cheapest guys, Amari Nyblack, Malik Benson, guys below 5K. A&M, Max Johnson, he doesn't have really a lot of differences between him and Wegman. He can run a little bit. His passing efficiency is decent. The real place where you see the difference is turnovers. Max Johnson is a turnover factory, and he turned the ball over 3 times against Arkansas. Just that inept offensive line couldn't keep KJ Jefferson upright enough to take advantage of it. That's going to be a problem against Bama, and I think it's a problem for Max Johnson. The only difference between him and a lot of guys on this slate is he's 6,200. So, you could maybe talk me into him, but at the end of the day, this game environment's terrible. Bama has a good defense. I still think it's not enough for me to get there on Johnson. Backfield, Le'Veon Moss is leading a committee that still factors in Amari Daniels and Reuben Owens. Game environment, not enough for me to play these guys. Le'Veon Moss, I'd be most interested in. 16 and 17 carries in back-to-back games. Receiver, I don't know what the heck happened last week. Really weird usage. You can look at this and you'll see Evan Stewart, 42% of the routes. Aeneas Smith, 76. Ja'Day Walker, 39. Noah Thomas, 67. Moose Muhammad, 48. I don't know what to make of this. Texas A&M has been banged up at receiver a lot this year, but they're finally fully healthy. It seems like they have 5 guys they want to play some. So I think you do sacrifice maybe, like a 95% route share, which you're going to get with LSU. You're going to get with Texas. You're going to get with a lot of teams. I don't think you're going to get that with A&M. But last week wasn't really competitive. Previously, they'd use like Evan Stewart, Smith, and Noah Thomas on these elite route shares. So I think it's still in their range of outcomes. I'd be looking to Smith or Stewart. Otherwise, I'll pass on A&M. Syracuse, UNC, 9.5-point spread in favor of the Tar Heels, 59.5 total. Very fast-paced game. Syracuse 21st in pace. North Carolina 39th. Over's taking some money. Syracuse's Garrett Schrader is a pretty good value. He has electric rushing ability. 29 designed attempts so far this year for 340 yards. He can 100-yard bonus for you on the ground. North Carolina's defense still doesn't scare you. They've been had multiple times this year. And Syracuse played an incredibly easy schedule prior to the Clemson game last week, depressing Garrett Schrader's volume. Only 27 attempts per game. That should certainly rise. He's live at 7,200. LaQuint Allen's one of the best running back plays on the slate, even as an underdog. He's averaging 18.6 touches per game. His role in the pass game is insane. Over 70% of the routes last week, 6 targets. So even though he only had 13 carries against Clemson, 6 targets. I mean, he still almost had 20 touches. Game script independent. One of the best running back plays on the slate at 5,800. Receiver had a lot of questions about this because Isaiah Jones is out, Oronde Gadsden's out, Trevor Pena's still not fully healthy. What do the routes look like for Syracuse? Well, you basically have Donovan Brown, 95% of the routes. He's been above 90% in 2 of the last 3. Damian Alford, above 90% in all of the last 3. And then Umari Hatcher, I think, is their wide receiver 3. He dropped down to 53% of the routes last week. That was with Darrell Gill jumping up to 48% himself. I think it's very clear you can target Donovan Brown, Damian Alford, Umari Hatcher, and Darrell Gill would be more tournament plays. But, I mean, Brown and Alford, not really that expensive to begin with. Gill at 3,400 is a guy you could maybe look to if you want to get a little crazy. Dan Villari, the tight end, just 50% of routes. He's still rotating. I wouldn't get to him. North Carolina, Drake May, 9,500. He's a bit too expensive for this slate. He's going to project worse than Jaden Daniels straight up. So save the 500. But tournaments, you could play him. Elite rushing ability, 33 attempts per game. Very live for a 300-yard bonus. There's nothing bad to say about Drake May aside from his price. Backfield is kind of diverged into like a 70-30 split in favor of Omari Hampton. I think he's certainly live in this game. Had 18 carries last week. His route rate's pretty good, above 40%. So 2 targets that put him at 20 touches. British Brooks is your change of pace. I would rather just find the salary for Hampton. Receiver is really tricky. They've had tons of injuries, and they get Tez Walker back, who's the stone minimum. He's the premier transfer everybody knows and loves. And finally, he got his waiver. The big question is, how much does he play? I am going to say, I think, as long as we don't get like some report that he's going to be limited or something, I think a lot of people are going to click his name because he's the stone min and he's going to let you jam LSU, Missouri, and all the studs you want. So just know this. I think Tez Walker is probably going to be popular. Anyway, let's dive into the other guys on this team and try to decipher where the routes go. Just on the back end, so you guys know, we have Tez, if you're using our projections, he's around 40% of the routes right now. I don't see that getting higher than 50. I don't see it getting lower than 30 unless we get a report. So just know if you want to boost his projection, go for it. That's just where we're going to sit for now without news. I think Nate McCollum is not coming off the field. He's been awesome. Weird usage, 21 targets down to 5. I mean, they're coming off the bye. McCollum should play. From there, you've got to decipher where do we think the routes go between Kobe Pacer, J.J. Jones, and Gavin Blackwell. Prior to Blackwell's injury, he played more than those two, so he's interesting to me as a buy low. Pacer, he had the most targets of those 3 when even when Blackwell was healthy, Pacer had the most targets. J.J. Jones has been distant in third, not by a lot, but his targets have been lower than Pacer and Blackwell when healthy. His routes have been lower than those 2 when healthy. I think if you were ranking these guys, you would still go McCollum 1, tentatively Blackwell, Pacer. I think those guys could be interchange 2, 3, J.J. Jones 4. And again, Tez Walker, he really depends on where you think the routes are going to come in. Hope that makes sense. It's a tough situation to decipher. I do believe that Tez Walker is probably the most owned because of pricing. Tight ends or rotation, don't worry about that. Purdue, Iowa, this is the X-Out special. 39 total, 2-point spread in favor of Iowa. Purdue normally plays an offense that's conducive to fantasy success, but they have an 18.5 total. Hudson Card, 35 attempts per game, 250 yards about. Can run a little bit, 75. Iowa's defense has been very good. Just game environment here projects to be so awful. You're probably not playing Card. Tyrone Tracy beat out Devin Maccabee, but they're still giving Maccabee and Downing some touches, not playing Tracy. Receivers, Deion Burks and Abdur-Rahman Yassin play every single snap. I still think you prefer to get to the LSU guys. This is the one spot I could see maybe a one-off. TJ Sheffield also plays every snap, just pretty distant in targets behind Yassin and Burks. Last thing, tight end Max Clare got hurt. Sadly, Garrett Miller priced almost identically, 3,800. Not really too much to see. I was starting Deacon Hill. There's no way you could pay me to play Deacon Hill. I think we're getting Caleb Johnson back. That muddles the rotation between LaShawn Williams. They weren't giving LaShawn Williams the lion's share of the work anyway. Kamari Moulton played disaster. Luke Lachey's out. Eric All's the only guy that's even worth mentioning. 7 and 8 targets back-to-back games. Only averaging 36.5 yards per game. Just a mess of a contest. Wake Forest got slaughtered in their first real competition. They are projected to get slaughtered here. 21-point spread in favor of Clemson, 51.5 total. Wake Forest is a mess. 15 team total. Don't play anyone on Wake Forest. Actually, you know what? I rescind that phrase. They're 16th in pace. Maybe you could play a run back if you're stacking Clemson. Backfield's a committee between Justice Ellison, Damon Claiborne. In competitive games, they're going to get stifled. Griffiths doesn't run, even though, he actually does run. He has 20 designed attempts, but he takes so many damn sacks that he only has 39 rushing yards on the year. So can't play Griffiths. You can maybe play Banks, Morin, or Grimes, even like a potential contrarian Keyshawn Williams. But Grimes at 3,900, he's averaging 5.8 targets per game. That's live for a punt option. Basically, it's just you hope these guys get 8 targets and they catch 6 of them for like 45 yards and maybe you luck into a score. That's the path for a Wake Forest receiver, and Grimes by far is the best price-adjusted play with Banks and Morin expensive. Klubnik's been a lot like McCord. He runs a little bit more, but his efficiency has been horrific despite 36.5 attempts per game. Fully expect Clemson to neuter their offense in this contest. I'm not going to play Klubnik. Will Shipley, when games are competitive, kind of ices Phil Maffa. It turns into like a 70-30 split. In non-competitive games, which this projects to be, you see more Maffa. Shipley at 6,400, still a good play. He's averaging 18.5 touches per game. His pass game rolls electric. So Shipley, solid play. I would like him more if you told me Wake Forest keeps this semi-competitive just so Shipley's pushed. Receivers, Bo Collins and Tyler Brown have emerged as the top 2. Antonio Williams is practicing, projects to return here. Not sure what that does to the rotation, but I don't think it affects Collins or Tyler Brown. Tyler Brown's been the best player in this receiving core, and it finally showed his route rate jumped above 90%. Bo Collins, he's steady, but not exciting. The wide receiver 3 last week was Troy Stellato. They fully benched Adam Randall, but I don't think Troy Stellato is a guy they really view as a game breaker. I wouldn't be surprised if it's just split snaps at wide receiver 3, that is, between Williams and Stellato. Jake Brenningstool, decent tight end play. His routes are solid. He's another tight end that catches the ball and falls down. He's averaging 19 yards per game. Vandy and Florida, 18-point spread in favor of the Gators, 52 total. Vandy's fast. Florida's not. Both these teams pass a decent amount. Florida probably approaches this game more heavy on the run, playing a incompetent opponent. AJ Swan projects to return, doesn't run, doesn't throw, too expensive, pass on Swan. Backfield's a committee. Patrick Smith, 60-40 split over Cedric Alexander. Chase Gillespie gets a carry now and then. Similar to Wake Forest, maybe you could play a receiver because Vandy's fast at 33rd in pace with a 59% pass rate. Will Shepard and Jaden McGowan are the 2 guys I would prefer to get to. Price on these guys, I mean, a lot of these receivers have decent prices. It just comes down to LSU so underpriced. Like, you're giving up a ton of projection playing like a Will Shepard to get instead of like a Brian Thomas or a Malik Neighbors. For tournaments, I think you got to do that at some point. But, man, cash games just play the LSU guys. Anyway, I would rank them Shepard 1, Jaden Thomas 2. London Humphreys is questionable. I do think he plays in this game. He should play a lot more than like a Quincy Skinner or a Jamarian Carter. He would be the wide receiver 3. Justin Ball rotates a little more than you'd like, but he's the tight end dimension. I'd rather just find the salary to get to Humphreys or McGowan. Graham Mertz, 6,400. Negative rushing yards in the year. Don't play Graham Mertz. Trevor Etienne's questionable. If he's out, Montrell Johnson is the easiest running back click on the slate against Vandy. We'll just have to wait and see on Montrell, but 50-50 committee usually when Etienne's active. Receiver Ricky Pearsall, he's the main guy to talk about. He's the only guy that has very consistent routes. Last week, they held out a couple players I thought were going to play, Eugene Wilson and Marcus Burke. They both could return here. I'm not sure. Just watch and see. That would hurt the receivers that aren't named Ricky Pearsall. I don't have a ton of interest in them anyway. I believe this is a pretty run-heavy approach for Florida. But last week, Khalil Jackson was the 2 with a 76% route rate. Andy Jean jumped up to 51%. He's one of their high-profile freshmen. That was noteworthy. I would love to see Jean keep rising in route share, but it's not enough for me to target right now. All this to say, I don't have an interest in anyone on Florida among receivers other than Ricky Pearsall, and unfortunately, 7,400. Why is he more expensive than any of the LSU receivers? Somebody in the comments, tell me, because I can't figure it out. UCF Kansas, another elite game, 64.5 total, 2-point spread in favor of UCF. It's moved a ton. This is because John Rice Plumlee is expected to play, and Jalen Daniels was all but ruled out. UCF 30th in pace. This offense is electric. Plumlee is an elite rusher. He's way too cheap at 7,900. I think he's viable in cash. If you get the green light, he's playing, which I think he's going to. Plumlee's an electric player. Backfield, RJ Harvey and Johnny Richardson form a 1-2 punch. In competitive games, we've seen this become RJ Harvey's backfield. He's 6,100, 21 carries and 2 targets last game. He's a good price-adjusted play. You can definitely use him against Kansas, who got gashed by Texas on the ground. Receiver, you have 2 elite receiving options in Kobe Hudson and Javon Baker. These are 2 awesome price-adjusted plays. I'll use them for sure in stacks with John Rice Plumlee. Wide receiver 3's mostly been Townsend, but you will see guys like Jalen Griffin, and sometimes they use 2 tight ends. That'll be like Holler, and then Randy Pittman. These are players that are all rotating on and off the field. So it's basically Kobe Hudson, Javon Baker, then your wide receiver 3, 4, and 5, as well as a couple tight ends are rotating that last position. I'll focus all my attention on the expensive guys. Jason Bean at 6,700. He's very mobile. I think we need to be considering him. UCF, they have pretty good metrics on defense overall, but it hasn't always been the best competition. And they are allowing almost 4.5 yards per carry specifically. Teams on the ground have been able to move the ball on UCF. With Bean's mobility, I'm very interested at 6,700. He's my preferred semi-punt option at quarterback. He's not stone mint or anything close, but he's pretty cheap in the context of this slate. I like Bean. Devin Neal, I think he would have carried the ball a lot more had that game remained even remotely close. Prior to the beatdown at Texas, he'd had 17 carries in back-to-back games. Decent buy low spot on Neal, good pass catcher, route rates at 50%. I don't think Highshaw has more than like 10 touches, his normal role basically. Receivers tough for me to get to for Kansas. They're rotating more than ever. Lawrence Arnold, Skinner, and Grimmer, your top 3, but you're now seeing Trevor Wilson, Trevor Cardell, Douglas Emelian, Tanaka Scott rotating in on occasion, so it's tough to get to a Kansas receiver. And that's it. Yeah. Our next one is the showdown, Colorado, Arizona State. So as you can see, we have all the slates up here. Check them out. Before we head out of here, I'll give you my top either 3 or 5 values per position by request. So we'll kind of give you different options for prices at quarterback. I think you want for sure someone in the Missouri game. I prefer Jaden Daniels for cash. And then depending on the way your roster shakes out, I think you probably want somebody like a Jason Bean to save some salary. Or if you can find enough money, you could go up to like a Brady Cook. I think those are 3 of your top 5 signal callers. But then there's some elite tournament plays. I mentioned Travis. His projection's awesome, assuming Virginia Tech pushes them even a little bit. And then I love John Rice Plumlee, who we just talked about. These are more tournament plays. Again, I'd look to Daniels. I would look to Cook, and I would look to Bean for cash. Another name I'll just briefly throw out there, Garrett Schrader, pretty decent price-adjusted play. For running back, this is, I think, a pivotal position on the slate. Top values, Will Shipley, he comes in number 1. We talked about him. I think he does need to be pushed in this contest. I didn't look at this ahead of time, but my projections indicate I should be looking more at Carson Steele and Harden. I have this, risk aversion to the running back position if they're in committees, but the game environment's awesome there, and both of them are cheap. So what I think this is saying, we're jamming good quarterbacks, we're jamming the LSU and Missouri receivers, and if you're pivoting, you're going to good guys like Keon Coleman. You need to save some salary at running back, and my projections are jamming a lot of Steele and Harden. Good game environment there, so makes sense. Take a longer look at these guys. They're not as bad as I thought they were. But otherwise, Jonathan Brooks, Montrell Johnson, even if ETN is in, he projects well. So he is an ultimate smash if ETN's out. And then, of course, LaQuint Allen, extremely good play for Syracuse. Receiver, this goes without saying. Please play an LSU receiver. Play Neighbors, play Brian Thomas. Play a Luther Burden. These are three of your top 4 receiving options. Johnny Wilson comes in as one of the best pivots for me. And then Carlos Hernandez, we discussed him at length for Washington State. He is the preferred punt option. But I also see Logan Loya up here. All I'll say is look at that UCLA-Washington State game carefully. There's a lot of good value in contrarian options in that contest. All right, that'll do it for me. If you have a comment, please leave it below or reach out to me on Twitter. That's the best way to reach me. I'm always on there at Matt_Gajewski. Otherwise, good luck, everybody. We will see you next week. Peace.